Enjoying cartoons, wearing costumes, sleeping with their stuffed animals, these are things that kids love to do. But in the state of Texas, they're now calling this non-human behavior and are going to ban it in schools. They're even threatening to fine parents in schools that let kids do this stuff. It's absurd. This is not a real problem. This has nothing to do with actual animals or even furries. This is a backdoor assault on LGBTQ rights and a way to push right-wing ideas in schools. I'm Amanda Marcotte. Welcome to Standing Room Only. You may be wondering why I'm wearing cat ears. Some of you may think that we're trying to appeal to anime fans. Others may be hoping that there's going to be some weird role-playing going on. Some of you probably saw the title of this video, know it's about furries, and guessed that we're doing a bit. Which is true enough, but I swear I'm here to make a point. None of you, I am sure, assume that I actually think I'm a cat. Republican State Representative Stan Gertis, however, argues that people who wear cat ears actually think that they're cats. He claims that schools in Texas have an epidemic of students identifying as animals. And he's introduced a bill to ban this behavior called the Furries Act, which Governor Greg Abbott supports. Furries stands for Forbidding Unlawful Representation in Role-Playing. I hate these bill names. Beep, 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 beep. I'll do it one more time to make sure we've got this. Forbidding unlawful representation in role-playing in education. There isn't even an S. Can't even spell. It's not even spelled right. The bill bans what Gertis calls non-human behaviors, such as using a litter box or licking oneself. Actual words in the bill. Among the alleged non-human behaviors, wearing animal ears or fake tails. Sharp viewers will no doubt notice the logic fail here. Wearing costumes is not an animal behavior. It is an exclusively human behavior. On Halloween, you do see dogs wearing costumes while they're out trick-or-treating, but you know that their human owners put them up to it. Everything about this bill is absolute nonsense. Kids are not identifying as animals. When Greg Abbott and Stan Gertis were confronted with this, they could not come up with a single example of any of this happening, especially kids using litter boxes in school.
Okay, and so I just want to ask the question again. Can you name a school where it has been confirmed that students are using litter boxes? This was at the top of your press release. This was mentioned when you introduced this bill. Can you name a school where it's been confirmed that there are litter boxes being provided to students?
For this purpose, no, I cannot.
School officials repeatedly debunked rumors of litter box use, but Gertis keeps repeating it. Gertis got this rumor off of an urban legend that's been circulating for years now and was even repeated by Joe Rogan on his show in 2022.
My friend, his wife, is a school teacher, and she works at a school that had to install a litter box in the girls' room because there is a girl who's a furry who identifies as an animal.
But even Joe Rogan walked it back after being told by countless people that it's nonsense.
I don't think they actually did it. I think there was discussions about doing it because there was one particularly wacky mother, but it doesn't seem that there's any proof that they put a litter box in there.
But the governor of Texas and other Republican officials keep repeating this urban legend. They're even lying about what furries are. Furries are people that like to dress up as animals for fun or even for sex stuff. It's a game. They don't actually think that they're animals. Furries do stuff like go to conventions, which animals can't do because they don't have the credit cards to pay for it. None of this furry panic is real. It's all an elaborate ruse to serve two agendas. First, it's about attacking the rights and humanity of LGBTQ people, especially trans people. Second, it's about pushing a Christian nationalist agenda. For decades, Christian conservatives have been pushing this notion that queer identities are just a trend being pushed on gullible young people. They aren't saying that quite as loudly about gay people these days, but the notion that trans identities are a social contagion has grown into a full-blown moral panic. We can thank people like Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling for that. The furry urban legend just adds more fuel to the fire. The implicit message here is We let kids identify as being trans, and now they're identifying as being animals. It's a reworked version of a previous Republican tactic that was applied to same-sex marriage, where they said if we legalize that, next thing you know, people will be marrying their pets. It's also a way of dehumanizing queer people by comparing them to animals, albeit in the most incoherent fashion possible. If you stick around for Pass the Mic, you'll hear more about this from our expert guest, Imara Jones, who's been doing work on this for years. Gender, like having a credit card or wearing a costume, is a very human behavior. Animals have sexed bodies, but they don't really do gender. My cat isn't like worried about his masculinity. I could put him in a tutu and he'd be exactly as annoyed as if I put him in a bow tie. I could have named him Princess Wigglebottom instead of Joey and he would not know the difference. I paid someone to cut off his balls and he isn't even mad at me. Animals don't care about gender. It's a human obsession. Which brings me to my second point. This is also about pushing a Christian nationalist agenda. The Christian right doesn't just believe that gender is inborn and immutable. They think it's the defining feature of a person's fate. To them, your gender determines whether you were born to lead or whether you're born to submit. They think it determines whether you get to have bodily autonomy or whether you're going to be forced to give birth. The right wants to believe men and women are total opposites. That's why they're so fixated on this tiny number of trans athletes. It's about making a spectacle out of trans people's bodies. It's also about pushing this myth that people assigned male at birth are superior to all cis women. We can see that in this clip where Donald Trump met Riley Gaines, who is a college swimmer turned anti-trans activist.
Look at me. I'm much bigger and much stronger than her. There's no way she could beat me in swimming. Do we all agree?
He couldn't beat her at a walking down the street contest. He couldn't beat her at a race to tie their shoes. It's helpful to look at the other bills that Republicans introduced in the Texas state legislature this year. There's one on letting homeschool kids play in sports at public schools. There's another about teaching kids about the evils of communism. And then there's the biggie, a bill mandating that the 10 Commandments be posted in every public school classroom. That bill is passed and is expected to become law soon. Check out my colleague Russell's video on a similar bill in the state of Louisiana. It's on TikTok. If only Texas Republicans had bothered to read the 10 Commandments, they might have noticed the one that says, "Thou shalt not bear false witness," which is what they're doing when they lie about trans people or accuse little kids of pooping in litter boxes. Welcome to Pass the Mic. My guest today is journalist and CEO of TransLash Media, Imara Jones. Thanks for joining us on Standing Room Only.
Of course, thanks for having me.
So today we're talking about a ridiculous bill in the Texas state legislature called the Furries Act that bans non-human behaviors for kids in school. I don't really think that's a real issue in schools, but this is a serious bill because it is a backdoor attack on LGBTQ people, especially trans people. So can you explain why that is?
Yes, I mean, I think that one of the things we have to realize is that the trans bills have to get more and more absurd because the whole point of them is to paint trans people as the other, to treat trans people as if they are not worthy of human dignity and respect. And that's because there's a long-term plan to be able to legitimize pushing trans people out of public life, perhaps even stigmatizing transness again to the point where it becomes something where people can be institutionalized or denied basic human rights. Like that is their plan. And so they have to then associate stranger and stranger behavior and make up things that aren't true in order to do that. So this furries bill essentially is about this furries phenomenon. And there are a lot of trans people who do participate in furries, but there are a lot of non-trans people, that participate in furries. Now, what's interesting is that there's always cosplay. And, we don't say that people who go and dress up as Iron Man or, storm at cosplay conventions all across the country are engaging in non-human behavior, right? This is specifically about stigmatization and tying this cultural development to trans people. And I think that it is very much in line with other things that they've done to try to associate trans people with the idea that there's now kitty litter in bathrooms. And the reason why this sounds so strange and absurd, and it's even to talk about it in a serious way, is because it's absurd. But I often think of the Voltaire quote, which is that, if I can get you to believe absurdities, I can get you to commit atrocities. And that is what's going on here. It's also the fact that they've passed so many anti-trans laws that in order to keep it going, you have to get more and more absurd.
Yeah.
You have to get more absurd, more extreme. And both of those things are happening. So you see, teachers fired in Florida for using the name of a child. There's a teacher that did that for a trans kid and was fired, right? We've seen Texas, with regards to executive orders from the governor, be able to use parents who support their trans kids as a reason to put kids in foster care, to remove kids from their homes. And that's the only way that you can go. They've done all of the things that they can do, or many of the things that they can do with regards to limiting healthcare and these other things. So if you're going to keep this going as an issue, you've either got to get more cruel or more absurd in your laws.
Yeah, it's happening really fast too. Like, we have this crap going on in Texas, but you look at the Trump administration, and they're already taking serious actions to deprive trans people of employment, deprive trans people of medical care, and we're only a few months into. Can you explain some of the things that have happened in the past few months on that front?
Well, all they've done is taken everything that was done in the first Trump administration, which was the most virulently anti-trans administration that we have had so far in American history, combined with all of the experimentation they've been doing in the last 6 years or so at the state level through state legislation. They've taken those two things together and have put it on steroids. And so among the very first things that Trump did was said that the federal government declares that there are only two genders, and that it expressed an interest in knowing what gender is inside the womb. It's the first time that that expression has ever entered into federal lexicon, which of course is just setting the stage for the federal government to be interested in a whole host of other things that happen in the womb, right? To sort of take control of people's uteruses, quite literally, using the conversation around gender identity. And that's then been followed by a whole slew of executive orders and executive actions with respect to education, with respect to housing, with respect to equal employment, with respect to literally erasing trans people from history that we know actually happened. Taking Marsha P. Johnson and Silva Rivera off of the National Park Service website with relationship to Stonewall, which is just an absurdity, right? And are now removing trans people from the military, mandating body inspections of people that they suspect are trans in order for the doctor to certify people's gender. Adults are having to do this. So I think that this is not only about, discrimination, but it is also a very up close and personal and cruel manifestation of the type of control that they want for everyone. And trans people are just the experimenting set of people that they are starting with.
Yeah, it's like a small, very vulnerable group of people that you can just exploit because they have so little political power.
And where that transphobia is a default in American society.
When we talk about transphobia being really normalized, I think it's obviously been on the rise in recent years in a lot of ways, with J.K. Rowling and obviously Joe Rogan. This litter box in schools rumor and the idea that kids are identifying as animals really got a big boost in 2022 when Joe Rogan talked about it. Can you kind of explain some of the way that kind of pop culture stuff interacts with the law?
Conversation sets the stage for what's on people's minds. And politicians are always concerned about conversation and what people are thinking about, because that playing to that is essentially how they keep their jobs. What do you care about? What are you thinking about at night? What are you talking about with other people? That sets the political discourse. I'm reminded of an instance where a journalist asked Bill Clinton, why did you stop talking about the environment at one point? And he said, I gave 10 speeches on the environment. I did several site visits to environmental projects across the country. No one cared. And I'm just like everyone else. If I'm saying something and people aren't listening, I start talking about something else, right? Like it literally is that. And so that conversation that's being created is setting the parameters for political debate. It goes back to the Voltaire quote that I mentioned, right? The absurdities leading to atrocities, right? The conversation leading to action. And so what's happening is that as the conversation on trans people shifts, as transphobia is exploited, as these absurdities are injected into our culture, it then becomes what politicians talk about and feel like they have to respond to. The rumors that show up on Joe Rogan and elsewhere are usually planted.
Yeah.
That they are looking at what is being talked about on the dark web, on certain websites, and those conversations on places like 4chan are also planted there. There's literally about a 24-hour pipeline between things showing up on 4chan and some of these other dark websites, and them appearing in places like Joe Rogan, them coming out of the mouths of people like Ben Shapiro, and also extreme politicians.
It's important because this kind of action on the state and local level is contributing to like the larger political environment. Mm-hmm. How should people see this connection between local and state government issues and our national political environment?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of experimentation that has happened. In just the last 5 years, half the states have passed anti-trans legislation. Already this year, there are north of, I think, 700 bills that have been introduced, breaking last year's record in total. There is political experimentation and policy experimentation at the state and local level, which then filters up to the national level. And all of the things that we see that Trump has done have their roots in either things that they tried in the first Trump administration or which have been manifested in terms of legislation. And that's because the entire anti-trans push, or a large part of it, is animated by the Heritage Foundation and by Alliance Defending Freedom, these extreme Christian nationalist groups. And because of the reach that they have, this issue is appearing at the same time at all of these different places. And so it's hard to separate what's happening nationally with what's happening at the state level and local level.
It gets to something I think that you were saying earlier, it's super important for people to understand, which is this isn't just about trans people. I mean, it would be bad enough if it was, but it's a wedge issue that they're using to come for everybody's rights.
Yeah, and old time wedge issues, they were used during the political campaign, and then afterwards the Republicans dropped them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it was like, okay, we're going to go extreme. But the Christian nationalist movement grew increasingly frustrated with politicians who were doing that. And then realized that they needed to take over the Republican Party. And so what you have witnessed is a wholesale takeover, a hostile takeover of the Republican Party by a combination of kind of Christian nationalist and authoritarian movements inside of the Republican Party. And so those people who were a part of the coalition and who they did play to with wedge issues, those people are now running the show.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the thing that people have to understand. Like, that is the Republican Party. It is now a Christian nationalist and authoritarian party. And so what that means is that they have learned that it is both important to use these issues politically in the way that I described, and also these are also true believers. Wedge issues are always bad, but wedge issues, I would say, kind of pre-Obama were really just political ones. And then once the adults came in the room after the election, they always dropped them. There are no more adults in the room. And that's why the issues are getting played out throughout the government.
And I think that's like one more reason that it's extremely important for people to pay attention to this happening in their local communities and on the state level and fight back. And so, you know, I'd like to give people a little bit of reason to hope or some kind of action plan. What would you say to viewers on what they can do to fight back?
They are counting on your transphobia, excuse me, your lack of knowledge, your lack of comfort with trans people as a way for them to get away with this, right? That's what they're counting on.
Yeah.
They're counting on when there's a conversation about trans people and you're like, oh, well, I don't know about that. Or, oh yeah, they're kind of strange. Or, oh yeah, I don't like them. But I'm a liberal, or I care about the environment. Or, you know, they are counting on that as their permission slip to move forward on these issues. I think that the first thing to do is to not give them a pass, right?
Yeah.
Like, that is to say that when you start to hear these conversations in your local school district, go to your next school board meeting and say, I don't want these books banned. I don't want these teachers fired because they are trans. I don't, you know, like, you can make your voice heard in whatever way you think is appropriate. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, especially at the local level and state level, calls matter a lot, right? We forget we think everything is digital and everything is an app. That's not true. Like, at a state legislator's office, they don't get a lot of calls about anything. So if they get a handful of calls about anything, it's massive, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a huge deal. And so if you call your state legislator, better yet, show up at an event where they're going to be, even if it's like a PTA or like a ribbon cutting ceremony or something, and you say something, that has a huge impact because, again, conversation shapes what they care about, right? In that way. I would also say it's really important to find the local or state-based organizations that are pushing back on these issues and find a way to be in community with them and in conversation with them, even if you aren't trans, right? Like, how do you support these groups that are standing up and saying something about these bills? I think those are all important. In places where people don't talk about this, one person raising it is huge.
These are tough conversations. So I like to end on a little bit lighter of a note. So I want to ask, if you ever had a chance to go on Joe Rogan's show and say some ridiculous rumor that he would just credulously repeat and then you could just get it out there, what would it be?
I mean, it's so fascinating. Like, we're just acknowledging that Joe Rogan is a massive source of disinformation. Like, that's just embedded in the question. Like, we have a junior minister for propaganda and we don't even think about it because he's bald and wears t-shirts and admits to faults and says he's just asking questions. I think the rumor that I would plant with him is that J.K. Rowling is behind QAnon. That she used her narrative powers in order to create this compelling conspiracy that would enrapture an entire movement with silliness and help them storm the Capitol. That sounds like magic to me. It sounds plausible, which is what you need in rumors that are going to, you know, become reality.
Yeah, that's why mine is that Donald Trump wears diapers. Because I think people kind of already believe that.
I was going to say, is that a rumor, or there are people that were close to him who are no longer close to him who have alluded and said this? So is it rumor?
So Imara, how can people follow you and your work online?
They can follow me on social media at my name, Imara Jones. It's not terribly hard to find me. And also follow TransLash Media. Both those things are really good ways to keep up with me and what I'm doing and what we're doing.
Thank you so much for being on Standing Room Only.
Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Same. Hey everyone, I don't want to give up the cat ears yet. I'm still feeling my furry self, and I'm here in Latchkey. It's my partner's record store in Philadelphia. I have the song recommendation of the week for Encore. It's the remix of Break My Soul, which was a huge hit by Beyonce. This remix is done by Honey Dijon. Honey Dijon is a longtime house DJ. She has worked in New York City. She got her start, however, in the 80s in Chicago. She was like 12 years old going to house shows by Frankie Knuckles, who basically invented house in Chicago. She came out as trans. She became one of the most famous house DJs in the world. And now she's a famous record producer. And she actually worked on Beyonce's Renaissance. She did the song Cozy. This album owes a lot to classic house artists, but she did this remix of Break My Soul, which I really like. And I love Honey Dijon. She does a ton of remixes of really excellent like pop artists. She has a great remix of a Lady Gaga song. She has a great remix of a Dua Lipa song. She also is like a fashion icon because she really did a lot of club work in New York in the 90s, but she also really was famous for doing a lot of fashion shows. She came out as trans in the 90s. And it's a real reminder that despite all the hysteria that we're getting nowadays with people acting like it's a trend or it's new, it's actually been around basically forever. There have been famous trans people for a long, long time now, and Honey Dijon is one of them. So yeah, check out her remix of Break My Soul by Beyonce. If you want more Standing Room Only episodes, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Standing Room Only started as a newsletter, and it's free to read. Click the link to subscribe. I love tips. These political battles are playing out in our local communities, your family, your school, your neighborhood. If you have a story, go ahead and drop me a line, leave it in comments, and don't forget to subscribe.